Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today, I'll be demoing the functionality of our Salesforce prototype for RentoMax. In this video, I will cover 4 use cases and their stories that were done in our team's first Scrum sprint. These cases are Manage Property, Manage Unit, Manage Tenant, and Manage Maintenance Requests. Each of these use cases has user stories as follows. During the demo, I'll be reviewing the acceptance criteria for each story to ensure proper features. Looking at the table to our left, we see our first priority, use case manage property. The user stories are as follow: create property, update property, and delete property. I will now show the functionality on the right tab in the Salesforce function. So here you see our properties tab. I'm going to click new to create a new property. There are several different characteristics of a property that we can put in. Property name, I will put in prop view just as an example. For street address, I will use 1234 Street Drive. City for the city, and for the state, I will just use Georgia. Okay, so I will hit save. So as you can see, we have the different property name, the street address, the city, and the state recorded for the certain property. I'd like to mention this number of units characteristic field right here is an auto update field that as we add units to this property, the number will change based on the amount of units that are there. And so, as you can see, prop view shows up in all of our properties, therefore fulfilling user story number 1, create property. We are able to create the new properties as well as record all relevant attributes such as address and name and so on and so forth. Next, we want to be able to update the property. So if I click on once again, the prop view, I'm able to do things such as change the name, the address, the city, and the state. For this example, I would just change the city to something more specific, and I would just say Athens for Athens, Georgia. And we'll hit save, and we'll see that the property changes. So that fulfills user story number 2. The final user story in the use case manage property is delete property. The acceptance criteria says that we need to be able to delete a property as well as delete related units alongside the deletion of the property. This is because a unit can't exist without a property. Therefore, if we delete a property, then all the units that are associated with it have to be deleted as well. For this example, we're going to look at our prop street property. It has 2 units, as you can see on the right side. And if we go to our units tab, we see that there are 2 units, prop street apartment 1 and prop street apartment 2 are related to prop street. That being said, when I delete prop street, we should see that when we refresh the units page, that those 2 units are no longer available. This concludes the manage property use case. Moving on to the manage unit use case, we see that that was the second priority in developing our prototype. Here are the user stories. We need to create unit, update unit, and delete unit. Starting with create unit, we need to be able to create a new unit. We need to be able to differentiate between apartments and townhouses and record all relevant attributes. This is very similar to our create property use case or user story above as well. I'll demonstrate the functionality on the right side. So let's hit new. We're in the units tab now. And you can see a bunch of different fields that we can put in for the unit name. So to make it easy, let's put this unit name as prop view 2. Our related property will be the prop view that we created in the previous clip. So here's where we differentiate between apartment and townhouses. The main difference here is that this field is connected to yard. As you can see, if we have an apartment, we cannot pick a yard because apartments do not have yards. But if we select the townhouse, this pick list opens up for us and we can either say that there is no yard or that there is a yard present. For now, let's just say that we have an apartment. For monthly rent, we're just going to say it will be $1,000. For square footage, we'll put 1,000. For number of bedrooms, we'll have 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. We'll say that the rental status is available. Okay. No yard, and let's just say no balcony for now. So we hit save, and we'll see that. There we go. Here's our created property as well as its related fields. Next user story is update unit. This criteria here is very simple. We want to be able to update the unit with any appropriate information. So let's say that this particular unit had an uptick in rent by about $300. We can change this rent to $1,300 and update that field for this property. The final user story in the manage units use case is that we need to be able to delete units. The acceptance criteria for this one says that we need to delete related units without the deletion of tenant information. This is because tenants can exist without a specific unit in mind. So therefore, we need to delete a unit. It should not, we should be unable to delete the information of the tenant as well. For this example, we will look at our prop view 1 unit. We can see that our rental status is rented. And if we look at our rentals or our tenants, we see that one of our tenants has rented the prop view 1 unit. As you can see, when we try to delete the unit, it will say that we are not able to because it is associated with a tenant already. On the contrary, if we try to delete number 2, which is available and has no tenant assigned to it, we are able to do so. That concludes the manage units use case. Next, we move on to the manage tenant use case. If you look at the third row in our table, you see our third priority use case, which was manage tenant. Like manage property and manage unit, manage tenant has 3 very similar user stories in create tenant, update tenant, and delete tenant. The functionality will be on the right. You see our tenants tab here with some available fields you can see on the front end. When we click new, we can add a new tenant. Let's just put myself as a new tenant for the example. Each tenant needs to have a rented unit that falls in line with acceptance criteria number 2, that we must assign a tenant to a property. Okay. So, for example, I just autofill some information for myself. The rented unit, let's just put us in prop view 2. Our date of birth. You'll see that if we put our date of birth in the wrong format, that it will validate it for us. So I need to put that in there. Now people in the household, for example, phone number, for example there, email address in there, and we must specify a move-in date. Let's just say that it is going to be tomorrow, but we don't have to specify a move-out date. When we hit save, we see that a new tenant has been created, as you see there, and that fulfills all of our acceptance criteria. Next user story we have is update tenant. This is very similar to update unit and update property. I'm just going to take one of these fields, let's say email address, and just change the email by 1 character, and we hit save, and as we see that the email address field is now changed. The update tenant user story is now complete. Finally, we need to be able to delete tenants as well. So if we go to our tenant tab, I'm just going to take the tenant that we had just recently made, and we're going to hit delete. That concludes our use case of manage tenant. Next, we'll move on to manage maintenance requests. Use case number 4 says that we need to manage maintenance requests. As you can see to our table on our left, our user stories get a little more complex, so we broke them down into 3 easy ones that you can see on the table. Looking at the user story descriptions, we see that these user stories are enter request information, send email notifications, and escalate requests. To begin, we're going to look at the first user story, which is enter request information. We need to be able to record all maintenance requests and be able to record all relevant attributes about that maintenance request. So on our right, we see our tab for maintenance requests, and we're just going to click new, and we can fill out some of these fields. For status, the default is pending. For type, we can pick either electrical or plumbing for the problem. We're going to click electrical for now. For reason, let's just say that the lights aren't turning on. Okay. For priority, we're just going to say this is a medium priority. We need to attach a tenant to this, so only tenants can put maintenance requests in. We're going to put that on our first tenant. And the request origin, we can either say the phone, the email, or the web. For now, we're just going to say phone. When we click save, we see that the different request fields are filled out. One field I'd like to go over is request ID. This is not a field that we filled out specifically, but this is an auto count field. MR stands for maintenance request, and this number at the end tells us the kind of the identification number of the maintenance request. When we go back to the tab, we see that it is auto counting. So we see that we have maintenance request 2, 3, 4, and the newest one we just created, maintenance request number 5. So that concludes the enter request information user story in the manage maintenance requests. The second user story for manage maintenance requests is that we need to be able to send email notifications. The acceptance criteria says that we need to send electrical requests to the electrical maintenance email and to send plumbing requests to plumbing maintenance email. If you remember in our last clip, when we were filling out the maintenance request, we were able to pick out a type, which you can see on this right side here, either electrical or plumbing. Electrical requests should be sent to the electrical maintenance person, and the plumbing request should be sent to the plumbing email as well. For this, I created a flow called request process. So as we see here, this flow will start whenever we create a maintenance request. And coming from the left side to run immediately, it splits off into this decision. If the type is electrical, it will send an email alert to the electrical. And for the plumbing, it will send it to the plumbing email as well. Because we don't have a user for the electrical email or the plumbing, I had just routed this email to my own email. That being said, for maintenance request number 5 that we just created, an electrical request, I should have gotten an email about that request. Let's check on it now. As you can see on the left side here, here's the email that I had just gotten in my inbox. It says that there's a notification that there's a new maintenance request created for this specific tenant, and you can see the details below. You can compare it to the right side of our maintenance request. We see that the different fields, including the type and the reason, are recorded in this email so that the maintenance person can see those different fields that we have in the system. That concludes send email notifications. The flow should split up the different requests into electrical and plumbing and send those requests to the appropriate email. Finally, we need to be able to escalate requests. This is the last user story on the use case for managed maintenance requests. So this has 2 acceptance criteria. The first one is to say that after 48 hours, we need to change the status to escalated. As you can see when we come through here, we can see that the status can be changed from pending to escalated down here. And after 48 hours, the system needs to email the system administrator to let them know that there has been an outstanding maintenance request for longer than 2 days. For that, we need to go back to our flow. So we look at our flow on the left side again were the emails, but then on the right side, we have a flow that splits off into something we call escalate. This only activates when after 48 hours. So we can see that we have a scheduled path here. The scheduled path on the right side for escalate says that we need to offset this number by 2 days after the request is created. So let's look at the flow. So an escalate decision. If the maintenance request has already been closed, or in this case, to use the correct semantics here, resolved, then it will do nothing. If the case has been resolved beforehand, it will just end the flow and nothing new will happen. But if it is escalated, which if we can take a look at the flow in specific, looking at the escalated, we see 2 different conditions. If the status equals pending still, or if the status equals in process, then it will update the record, as we see here. It'll change the record for the status field. It'll change it to escalated. And it'll email the alert to the system administrator. In conclusion, I wanted to reiterate the use cases that were finished in Sprint 1. Those were managed property, managed unit, managed tenant, and managed maintenance requests. We went through the acceptance criteria of each user story as we went through the demo. As you can see, all of our acceptance criteria were followed down to a T, except for the very last one. We did fulfill that requirement using the flow, but we weren't able to actually route the different emails to the specific maintenance person, and I just had to route it to myself. When a specific maintenance person comes to mind or a user is added, then only then can we route the flow to there. The final thing I wanted to highlight was the final user story about escalating unresolved requests. Originally, that request was going to be put in Sprint 2, as you can see on this right-hand side here. Fortunately, we were able to finish a lot of the use cases much earlier than expected in the sprint. Therefore, we thought that we might get a little bit ahead and finish that last user story by escalation. This will decrease the amount of work that we have to do on sprint 2. A little sneak peek into sprint 2 shows that we are going to be generating different reports based on the information and fields that were developed in sprint 1. Thank you so much once again for tuning in and listening to the demonstration for the RentoMax Salesforce platform. Hope you have a great day.